Welcome back to my third video in this third chapter of making asteroids in GameMaker. And in this video, we're going to actually get our lasers, as you can see here, we're going to get our lasers to actually damage the asteroids and then destroy them, and then get the asteroids to spawn new asteroids when they are defeated. So that's an important part of the game of asteroids. So let's get to it. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is actually import some spark effects and a few other effects so that we can have some visuals of when my lasers hit the asteroid. So under sprites, we're going to go to effects, and inside of here, we're going to create a new one. We're going to create a new sprite called SPR underscore spark. And this is going to be the spark for an individual laser hit. So much like the engine spark, this is going to be 5 separate frames that we're going to import. So when we actually go to edit image, or actually rather import, we're going to multi-select the 5 frames. So that's under effects. And then you can see that it's called Spark 1, Spark 2, Spark 3, Spark 4, Spark 5. So I'm going to single left click on 5, hold down Shift, and then single left click on Spark 1. And you can see that it's loaded the file names in the correct order. Then I hit open, tell it yes, and then here is my spark. And I'm going to leave it white because I'm going to tint it based off of the effect color of each laser. So I do want to adjust the frames because this is going to be way too fast. So I might drop this down to, again, I think 12. So we'll see if that looks good. While I'm here, I do want to load in a smoke explosion for when we defeat an asteroid. So under effects, we're going to right click and create a new sprite. And this is going to be called SPR underscore smoke. And this is a sprite strip. So I'm going to want to actually go to edit image instead of import. And from here, I go to the image menu, top menu option and import strip image. And we can see there's one here called smoke sheet. And this is my graphic for the puff of smoke that's going to happen. You can already kind of see the size when I mouse over it, that the horizontal dimension is 1,280 and the vertical dimension is 128. So that already kind of gives me a clue of what size each one of these is going to be. So each individual frame is 128 by 128. And there are 10 of them. There's no spacing in between, so these are all going to be 0. And then we hit convert, hit yes, and then we can exit out of here. Then just make sure that we tell this it needs to be in the middle center, and then that is good enough for this graphic. Now, one thing that might come up is the size of this. This is kind of large. So we may end up resizing it when we spawn these, but for now I can just leave it as it is. So those are the effects that I'm going to need. Now I'm going to actually go through and start programming the collision with the laser, because we want to be able to have our lasers impact on the asteroids and deal some damage. So let's go to the object for the asteroid parent. And this is where we're going to handle the collisions at. So we're going to add another event for a collision with the object player projectile. That's that parent object. It's the one that doesn't have a graphic. And again, this is using the parenting so that if I have 5 lasers, I don't have to program 5 different collisions. If they're a child of this parent, this player projectile, it's going to automatically execute this code. And you can kind of see how this is going to save us so much time as we begin to develop things. So making proper use of this parenting feature, using essentially what amounts to an abstract class, is a really, really powerful tool and makes it so much easier for us to code. So I have my collision with a player projectile. And so what's going to happen here is collision with laser, damage HP, show spark, and delete laser. So let's go and actually do that. So the hit points are first, so take damage. That is current HP minus equals other dot damage. So we're accessing an instance variable on the thing that we're colliding with. So essentially we need to hope that other has a field for damage, and we know that object player projectile does in fact, go find it, it has a damage field. The other one that we're going to care about is effect color, because we're going to use that to determine what color spark to render. And each one of these is going to have a different value for effect color or damage. So it'll read the actual value, not this kind of default 0 damage and generic white effect of the parent. So going back to this asteroid parent, so taking damage is just as simple as saying current hit points minus equals other dot damage, and then let's spawn the spark. Oh, we actually need to make the object for the spark. We made the graphic, but we never ended up making the object. So I'm just going to clone this object engine spark, because it's the same thing. I want to have that end of animation event that deletes it. So I'm just going to duplicate that and call this object spark. Open it up. Make sure I'm editing object spark, not engine spark, and switch the graphic over to the regular spark now. I'm going to X out of that. And while I'm here, I'm going to just duplicate another one of these. It honestly doesn't matter. They all kind of have the same behavior. So I duplicated the explosion, and I'm going to call this object smoke. And I'm going to assign it the smoke sprite. So you can see I've given it the smoke sprite. That does remind me, I should make sure that my spark effect was centered. I don't think it was. So if I look up my SPR spark, yeah, I forgot to center that. So I just told it to put it to middle center. And I believe smoke was centered, yeah. So, okay, we're done with these objects. We can now safely go back to the asteroid. And we want to spawn the spark. So we'll say var spark equals instance underscore create underscore layer. Now we want to spawn this at the position the laser hit us at. So we're going to use other x and other y, and then object spark. Because if we used x and y, oh, I need to specify the layer. So if we just used x and y, it would spawn it at the asteroid's center, rather than the center of the laser that just hit us. Then spark.imageBlend. This is the color of the effect, and if we recall, our lasers had an effect color variable, and so that's going to then tint this white sprite to whatever color we wanted it to be, and so that then so the spark will, to get the spark to appear on top of things, we're going to set the depth to -10, so it's going to appear on top. And then we want to delete the laser by calling instance destroy, but inside of the parentheses as the parameter, we're going to say other, and other's referring to that laser that is colliding with me. Because if I just say instance destroy with no parameters, it destroys the asteroid. So now, we haven't coded the asteroids to actually acknowledge when they have negative hit points. So our asteroids are immortal right now. but we should be able to hit them with our lasers and see a spark appear when we do. So let's play test this. And when I shoot them, you can see that I'm getting this little, spark effect appearing when I hit. And it's actually based on the color of the laser that hit them. Oops. Now, just as an interesting point, I do want to point out that the collision event in GameMaker is a per frame event, meaning it actually calls this collision every frame during the overlapping of a projectile with the asteroid. So I do feel like that is an annoying limitation because other game engines have a collision enter, a collision every frame, and a collision exit event, so that you can maybe only trigger it the first time something collides, but the GameMaker one triggers every frame. And to demonstrate that, if I just take out this destroy the laser, you'll actually see the laser trigger this spawning of the spark multiple times as it's passing through the asteroid. So you can see every frame that it was passing through and at the speed that it was passing through, it spawned a spark through that laser, or through that asteroid. And so that actually kind of raises the issue of how it might be a little bit tricky for you to program a laser that maybe pierces an asteroid, because then you're going to have to start remembering which objects you may have collided with. So just kind of for reference, it's important to know that the collision event in GameMaker is per frame. It doesn't make any differentiation between if it's the first frame of the collision or if it's like the 10th frame of the collision. That might be something you have to handle with code. So that's kind of here. Now I will say in the next video, we're going to look at spawning damage text. And that's going to be like we can pop up the number of damage that we dealt, and that's going to be kind of cool. So we'll come back to this little piece of code in a second. But we want to get the asteroids to actually explode. And then also once they explode, we want the big asteroids to spawn new asteroids, because that's kind of the whole dynamic of the game. So let's go to end step. And after we unstick asteroids, we should check hit points. So typically, and this is actually very important, you want to only check for the potential destruction of an object at the very end of a frame. Because once you remove something from the game world, it's no longer in the game world. So if you start trying to access X and Y, you might get some unpredictable behavior. So let's add check if asteroid is at 0 or less HP. So I just want to make sure I'm on the parent, because we want all asteroids to kind of follow these rules. So if current underscore HP is less than or equal to 0, and you use less than or equal to because it is possible to get hit by like a 1,000,000 damage laser, and at which point the asteroid have like negative 9,000 or whatever hit points. So let's spawn the cloud of smoke. So var smoke equals instance underscore create underscore layer XY layer object smoke. So it'll make a little puff of smoke. I know in a space game, a puff of smoke doesn't make sense, but it's just the debris of the asteroid flying everywhere. So smoke.depth equals -15. Now here's also where we would want to scale it, and we probably will need to kind of play around with scaling this. And then instance underscore destroy. And this will delete the asteroid. So it doesn't spawn the new ones yet, and so we're going to need to kind of add that. So if we hit play, we should be able to destroy our asteroids now. And so we can see that oh, we need to adjust the frame rate on that puff of smoke there. So I'm going to jump down to my effects sprites and go to the sprite for smoke, and I'm going to drop that down to 12 as well. All right, so we're going to go back to the asteroid. Now, actually, kind of seeing all this, well, we'll put sound effects in afterwards. So what we want to do next, our asteroids can get destroyed. There's a little bit of a mismatch in the size of the puff of smoke here. That one seems fine, but for the small asteroids, we might need to scale it down because they don't need as big of a puff of smoke. So what we might want to consider on this asteroid parent is adding a effect scale, and that will be equal to 1. And effect scale is going to be something that we can just tell it to maybe make the smoke bigger, make the smoke smaller, depending on what we want. So over here, when we spawn our smoke, we can say smoke dot image underscore x scale equals effect scale, and do the same thing for the y. So that if the little asteroids want to have a smaller puff of smoke, we could, and then maybe you might add a giant asteroid, and maybe you'll want the effect scale to be twice the size. Next up, let's add the code for allowing it to spawn new asteroids. And this is where it's going to be kind of clever because we're going to make this a little bit dynamic. So we're going to create a new variable called num small asteroids spawn. Well, not the greatest name, but so we're going to specify 3. We're going to switch this to an integer for obvious reasons. You don't want to be able to spawn half of an asteroid. And then also, we're going to create something here called ref small asteroid. We'll just call it that. And then instead of a real, we can actually link it to an asset, which is really pretty cool. So by linking it to the asset, I can then choose which thing to spawn with this. So I can then make sure that I'm picking an asteroid small here. Oh, actually, I wouldn't well, I'll leave it blank for now. So, because that's something we would want to assign over here. We'll want to overwrite that. So that's going to contain a reference to which thing to spawn whenever it's defeated. So maybe we'll just leave this to default to 0. And so inside of this destruction code, right after we delete our asteroid, what we might want to do is if there's new asteroids to spawn them. So var radius. So this is just a way for me to kind of dynamically calculate about how big this asteroid is. So this estimates a radius of the asteroid. So what it's essentially doing is we're averaging the height and the width of this asteroid. And so if I divide by 2, it averages the height and the width. Then by dividing by 4, I'm essentially dividing by 2 again, because if I just do the average of the width and the height, that's going to essentially be a diameter. So I need to divide by 4 to get the average of the height and width, and then to get the radius instead of the diameter. All right, so then we're going to, now we could use a for loop here. I'm going to use a while loop. And we're going to do count. So while count is, oops, I need parentheses. While count is less than, whatever that weird name is here, num small asteroids spawn. It's quite a variable name. So make sure we get all these curly braces. If HP is less than or equal to 0. So while their count is less than the number of small asteroids to spawn, we will generate a new random position to spawn it in. So we'll say, call this new underscore x equals the old x value plus random range, which generates the floating point from negative radius to positive radius. Then we're going to do this for y as well. Then we're going to actually spawn it by saying instance underscore create layer new x comma new y comma layer, and then we're going to spawn the object that we've referred to here, ref small asteroid. So rather than specifying a specific thing, we're just going to use that instance variable. And then, because we're happy with what we spawned, count plus plus. You can optionally add code here to make sure things don't get stuck. But I'll leave that up to you if you want to pursue that. I don't think it needs it, but if you wanted to refine this, you could play around with some things that may re-roll the random position. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of play with that. So this should spawn us a new asteroid. Now, to kind of MS Paint this out, and I will acknowledge this may not be the most best way to do this. So essentially what we're doing is, if the old asteroid is right here, and, you know, this is the width of it. Let's just, for easy computation, say that that's 60. This is the old width. The old height might have been 80. So the average of those two ends up being 70. And then when we average that again, we end up getting 35. So essentially what's happening is we're taking the center here. This is what the code is referring to as x and y. So that's what is happening. So the first order of business was when I did this part, var radius. This right here is radius. And once I've computed that, then I'm going to randomize a value essentially in a box. So this is the center of the old asteroid, and then I create this plus and minus 35. So it's essentially kind of making a box 35 units that way, negative 35 units that way, 35 units in the y direction, and negative 35 units in the y direction. And so then this becomes the box that it's going to randomly pick a new, so it's going to randomly pick some values, like it might pick here. And then that's going to be where the new small asteroid is going to spawn. And then it's going to randomly pick another one. So yes, there is a slight possibility that it could possibly pick and spawn another asteroid inside of the asteroid. But we've added the code, so these two asteroids should push each other out of each other. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Now, maybe we could have gone about this a different way, and once we've computed radius, maybe we then just computed an angle so that this is more spherical. But I don't think it's really going to make a huge difference during gameplay. So that's kind of the philosophy behind how we're respawning these asteroids. So to put this into practice, if we jump over to big asteroid, and then we go to variable definitions, what we want to do is overwrite this num small asteroids to spawn. So we want to spawn 3 new asteroids, and we want to overwrite the reference, and we want to spawn small asteroids. Not asteroid parents. Small asteroids. And then also when I jump over to small asteroid, I'm going to change the effect scale. So I'm going to jump over to small asteroid, and then I'm going to set the... So small asteroids aren't supposed to spawn anything, and now you could add tiny asteroids if you wanted, but I do want to change the effect scale to be 0.5 so that the little puff of smoke should be smaller. Then if I hit play, all of these changes should have taken effect. And so now I should be able to destroy big asteroids, and then they create new small asteroids. And now I'm able to destroy the small asteroids with any weapon I want. Perhaps my weapons are not the most balanced things in the world. But yeah, so I can get destroyed by asteroids. I can get destroyed by both kinds of asteroids. And I've got them spawning new asteroids. And the effect color of the sparks are working. The size of the puff of smoke is working. So the only thing that's left to do for our weapons is to add floating damage numbers. And so we're going to add floating damage numbers in the next video. And then that will actually wrap up us being able to damage asteroids. Then the final chapter will actually look at us setting up levels, lives, respawn, and kind of getting a little bit of a game structure to work to this. So join me for the next video where we add some floating damage numbers, which are like my favorite thing in the world to do. And I will see you then. Thank you for watching.